Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday to everyone. Good afternoon. It is December 8th. And as usual, we are here each Friday with you at this time, 8 p.m. Eastern, where we share in another lunch and learn. And today is no different. We are here to share in another, Dr. Marcia would say, sizzling topic. And today we will be talking about unleashing the inner leader, unleashing that inner leader. And with me today, I am Dr. Janice Brooks. I am a life strategist. I am a part of the Maxwell team of leadership coaches, trainers, and speakers. I'm also a licensed pastoral counselor. And I help you to unleash, let me say, the leader in you. I help organizations and individuals with strategies to grow. With me is Dr. Siegfried Howell. He is my co-host today. Dr. Marcia is not here with us today. Dr. Howell is a master life coach. He's also a relationship coach and consultant. He also does corporate training, corporate speaking, and corporate coaching, as well as individual on the individual side. And he also help you to unleash that inner leader that is within you, which is what we will be talking about today. Because every single one of us has a leader inside of us, whether you're leading from home, whether you're leading in your workplace, or you are leading in the world at large. There is a leader inside of you. But how do you get that leader out? How do you allow that leader to come out so that others can know that you are a true leader? So, Dr. Howell, I am going to start with by asking you the first question today. When we talk about unleashing that leader in you, we're really talking about exposing something that is already there. So, what should be the principles that guide us or guide a person to visualize their future life?
Well, you know what? That's a very interesting question. I'll have to go from this perspective. One of the biggest things that guides a leader is knowing their purpose. If you know your purpose, then every single last decision that you make is going to be in alignment with your purpose. And so when you know your purpose, it connects you to the role, even when the meaning is difficult for you to understand. So you might have a task that's a little beyond you. It might be a stretch task, not, which is a little different than a stretch goal. But if it's slightly beyond your comfort zone, by knowing your purpose, you know what your outcome is going to be. You know what type of outcome you're trying to achieve. And so that can help you along the way. It helps you with all the decisions. It helps you with making the team or putting the team together. It helps you every step of the way. It also guides the decisions that you make when the path is unclear, because you will not know every single last thing. So as a leader, you have to be smart enough to make sure that you put people on your team that have expertise in areas where you might be weak. So you might be unclear as to how members of your team are going to get the job done, but you must be able to trust them to work cohesively to help you get that job done. And it also ensures that your action serves towards the team's needs. So when you know your purpose, it's not ego-based. It is interest-based. And once your team is interest-based, nobody feels like they're on the outskirts. No one feels like their ideas aren't important. And you can cohesively gel together and move forward towards your purpose.
Wow, Dr. Howell, there's so much meat that you have shared right there. I grabbed for my pen to write not ego based, but interest based, when you know your purpose. And you have said a lot, and so I just want to add a little bit, and just adding a little bit, I want to start with a quote I love so much from Neville Goddard. And he said, to reach your higher level of being, you must assume a higher concept of yourself.
Mhm.
And it's all about what you talked about there, that knowing that purpose. And when I think about the word visualize, that word to me means to envision, to imagine, to think about. And knowing this definition, it brings me to the point that every single one of us is created uniquely. We have different desires, we have different passions, we have different values, we have different beliefs. And so when we are able to visualize our future life, what it looks like, I do believe that some of the principles that should guide us should be our values, our mission, and as Dr. Howell said, our purpose, and even our desires at times, because I come back to where God says He will grant us the desires of your heart. And if you don't have a desire, then you can't start something, because it's a desire that pushes you to start something. And so I do believe that we should be able to use our values, our mission, our purpose, our principle, our desires to visualize the future that we want. And especially at this time of the year, when we are about to go into a new year, I really would encourage every person who is watching this live today. And if you watch the replay at some point in time, go ahead and put hashtag replay. I would encourage you to have or to create a life journal in which you have your life mission, your life values, your life vision written. God says that He knows the plan that He has for us, that plans to prosper us and to give us hope and a bright future. But what are the plans that we have for ourselves? How will we now be able to go to God and say, these are the plans that I have? How does these line up with your plan? And listen to what He's saying. You see, the vision is what we see in our future. And so in that life journal, you should have, what do I see for myself in the next year, in the next 3 years, in the next 10 years? You may not be here at that time, but at least you should be able to write your own vision. And it's when you write your vision, you will be better able to visualize. How can you visualize something that you don't even have an idea of? When you're able to write that vision, then you will be able to visualize and bring that vision to light. And Dr. Howell, that brings me to the next question. So why is being aware and knowing these principles that guide us, why is being aware and knowing the principles that guide us so important to our leadership philosophy?
Well, first of all, one of the things I want to talk about is adaptability. If you look at leadership in the early 1900s and you follow it all the way up until probably somewhere in the 1990s, leadership changed dramatically. You used to have an authoritative type leadership back in the day where, the leader had, he had all the power and he gave everyone the information or the marching orders. And you found that with a lot of the automotive companies and a lot of these different businesses. But when things went south, it really hurt those companies. So when you had a good authoritative leader back in the day, when everything was going good, it went well. But when things went bad, man, oh man. And then when you had to fire a leader, especially one where no one else knew what the inner thoughts of that person was when that person left, it left a big gap in that company. I mean, you're talking about millions and billions of dollars in like an auto industry or in the steel industry or any type of those industries. a lot of them never came out that hole. And so then people started to look at different types of leadership and different principles in leadership. And one of those things was servant leadership. You have the transactional leadership. You have, you have the laissez-faire, which a lot of people don't like, but it has its place, and so transformational leadership. And so there are principles that leaders need to be aware of. One of the principles is make sure that you let your ego go to the side so that everyone has a say. A lot of leaders like to say they have an open door policy, but when you say something that goes against what they are thinking about, they go after you with all the power that they have. One of the things that have come up recently, especially in the 2000s, is a term called appreciative inquiry, which is everybody has a say. Because if you're not aware of what all the systems in your organization are saying, you can make decisions and policies that can severely impact people that you don't interact with on a day-to-day basis, especially people on the groundwork. And so as a leader, you must know that there is a level of flexibility that's needed. So once you know that there's a level of flexibility that is needed, it shapes your behavior in your decision making. It shapes your flexibility. It shapes your the way that your values and your actions interact with the day-to-day decisions that are being made. It shapes your team and how comfortable people feel in sharing their opinions. Because, and here's the big thing, leaders want people to voice their opinion and want people to be innovative. But when those innovations fail, how does the leadership deal with the people who put forth those ideas and those concepts? And so if the leader has their back, then you create an environment where people are open to going beyond the box, going outside the box, being innovative. But if the first person that comes up with an idea that seems good, if that idea fails, if that person gets ostracized, booted out, kicked out, or demoted, then it creates an environment where people do not want to share their ideas because of fear of retaliation, of being ostracized, of being demoted. And so the principles that guide your leadership are important because it sets the culture from the top down. When people feel like, hey, there is an opportunity for me to move up, to advance, there's an open door policy where I can vet ideas and not be ostracized. When people believe that their voice makes a difference, that's when leadership is the most innovative. And so anyone can say that they're a leader. But if you don't follow the basic fundamental principles of leadership, you're going to have a system around you that is broken or malnourished, and it's not going to be efficient and optimized.
Wow. You have so rightfully explained everything that needs to happen, whether in the workplace, in the home. And I like how you took it from that concept, because people follow leaders. And if leaders are not doing what they need to do, or if leaders don't have that real leadership philosophy that they hold on to, then there's going to be a disconnect between leaders and followers. But I want to just add a little bit to that, and I'm taking it from the concept of that inner a person, that inner leader, because everything starts within. And because the question talked about being aware and knowing, I want to say that when we are aware as well of who we are as a leader and what we are called to do, then we will act differently. In other words, transformation and the whole basis of our change that we will have in this life must first start with our mind. It must first start with our thoughts. But our thoughts, they will not change unless we have new ideas. And I know you talked at the beginning about how things have changed. And there are still some leaders that are holding on to concepts and ideas that have been centuries old. And so they hold on to these. And many a times, this is all they know. So there is no space to unleash that inner leader to that those ideas, those concepts that will help their team to grow. And so I took it from that side because I do believe that all transformation begins within. The first step to any change is the renewal of our minds. And so the process, let me call it this, the process of rising from our present state to a higher state of leadership, we first now have to be transforming our mind. We have to recognize that things are not the same as they were 20 years ago. We have to read books. We have to get into places where we can now see how things are done differently. We have to go around the right people. We have to educate ourselves. We have to do so many other things so that we can unleash that inner leader, so that our philosophy cannot remain at this stage of being archaic, but that we are on the cutting edge of leadership, where we now are leading from within. And that is what I wanted to add to what you have said. But Dr. Howell, as we continue in this conversation, many persons might be thinking, I as an individual, how do I effectively and systematically build these leadership qualities that we're talking about here within myself and within others? And I want to say that we begin everything by doing. You see, we can have a thought, we can have an idea, we can write it down, we can do whatever we want to do. But if we don't begin, then nothing happens. And so I say that we build leadership qualities within ourselves and within others by doing. And I want to use three words, Dr. Howell. I want to say first we think of them. Then I say that we release them or speak them. And then we do them. And this last one, or we do them and live them. Nothing truly happens until we start to do the thing or live the thing. And so we can think truly. And when we think truly, we know that our thoughts become like a feeding tree for ourselves and for others. And so we have to be careful of the thoughts we have, because those thoughts are going to come out in our words. And when we start to speak truly, every one of our words will also bear fruit, because as the Bible says, life and death is in the power of the tongue, and we shall reap the fruits of it. So first of all, we have to think truly, what is that, those qualities that I really want to evidence in my leadership space, whether at home, at work, or wherever. Think about it carefully. And then we have to release it. Let it go. And when I say let it go, speak it out. This is my, just like last time I talked about what my values were. We have to let other people know what is that quality, or what is that inner potential that we are releasing, so that they can know, do and live. The Bible says, again, and I'm referring to the Bible so many times today, the Bible says, write the vision and make it plain, so that those who read it will run with it. So people not just going to read, but when you exemplify it, then they will be able to run with it. Our life is a testament written both to ourselves and to others. So when we start doing, then we become that testament that others can see. So what do you have to add to that, Dr. Howell?
I liked the way you brought it full circle, and it tugs at my heart, because one of the things that I have been looking at this year are affirmations. You know, people talk about how manifestation is possible when you use affirmations. You say this for 30 days and 60 days, and then all of a sudden this and that is supposed to happen. Well, here's the problem I have with manifestation and affirmations. I believe it's at least a 3-step process. You have to say the affirmation. You have to believe the affirmation. And then, like you said a few minutes ago, now you have to go and live the affirmation. So there is an action process that a lot of people are leaving out. And so the people that want money, they read all these money affirmations, and they believe they're going to get they believe they're going to get money, but they don't do anything about it. Or now we're coming to the end of the year, and so you hear people say, like, this is what, I'm going to get married in 2024. I'm going to get a lot of money in 2024, and I'm going to have this happen to me in 2024. But are they really doing anything to make it possible? Do they have a plan of action that is going to make it successful? Or is it something that they're just dreaming about? And so as a leader must be able to balance not just encouraging people or not just telling people that they did a good job, but they must be able to say, okay, you did a good job, and I'm going to give you daps for that. I'm going to give you encouragement for that, because you really outdid yourself. But I'm going to stretch you by asking you to do this particular thing. Can you improve on this next time? And so as a leader, you want to be able to encourage people to go the next step. And so you have to be able to praise people, but give them room for growth. You have to be able to spotlight the areas where they did well, but you also must be able to give them constructive feedback and stretch them outside of their comfort zone to make sure that they feel comfortable. And so the role of a good leader is to emphasize those things that were working properly. But you also want to push those things that may need a little bit of help, that may need a little bit of assistance. And so a leader must be adaptive enough to encourage, but yet still motivate, to give praise, but yet still push forward to make sure that everyone feels stretched a little, even though they did a good job on the last assignment. I think we lost Dr. Janice on this one, so we will continue to move forward. So how can leaders stretch themselves? What are some of the things that leaders can do to stretch themselves? Well, one of the things that a leader can do to stretch themselves is to make sure that they look at their strengths and continue finding ways to improve in those areas. You want to make sure that you read up on things that you're good at so that you become better. And you want to make sure that you hire people in those areas that are weak to you, in those areas where you have blind spots, so that you can learn from them as they move you forward. And you also have to make sure that you don't render yourself vulnerable to burnout. Don't try and do everything on your own. You have to be flexible. If you know that you have a weakness, put people on your team that can make your weakness into a strength, because that's their strength areas. And so you want to make sure that you are continually finding people around you that can make you look good in those areas that are weak, so that you don't get that burnout, so that you don't burn your candles on both ends, like people will say. Dr. Janice, it's good to have you back. I started to go in number 4.
Oh, Dr.
Yes,
Howell, I'm
I
telling you,
continue. So the one
this,
that we're working on is how can leaders stretch themselves. And one of the things that I said was that you have to know your weak spots and know your strengths, and take those strengths and make them stronger. Know your weak spots and hire people, or surround yourself with people that will help you improve and will help your team improve. And by doing that, what you will do is make sure that you don't suffer burnout because you're overworking yourself and overloading yourself. A lot of times, we as leaders get burnt out because we micromanage the people that we've put in those areas, or we don't put people in those areas because we have that syndrome where we want to let people see how hard of a worker we are. So woe is me, I'm overworked as a leader, nobody's stepping up. And is it really that no one's stepping up, or you're not allowing anyone to step up? And so you have to ask yourself those questions so that you can come up with answers that adequately describe what type of leader you are. Because even if you're a transformative leader, that should not only be the only the only skill in your arsenal. You want to also be transactional for those people who need some type of transaction in order to move forward. You have to be laissez-faire for those people who are self-motivated and stay out their way so they can get stuff done. You also have to make sure that you can accommodate all types of needs of people on your team. And so, yeah, you might have a dominant leadership style, but you have to be adaptive based on the people that are on your team. What do you have to add to question number 4, which is how far should leaders stretch themselves to make sure that they be the best that they possibly can?
so thank you so much, Dr. Howell, for carrying on. I believe this technology thing, it gets out of hand sometimes, but I'm glad to be back here. So I just want to, you mentioned earlier about the strengths and the weaknesses. And I know a lot of times we hear about strengths and weaknesses, and we hear people say, build on your strengths and crush your weaknesses. But I think that doesn't work all the time. First of all, I would like persons to evaluate what their weaknesses are and what their strengths are. And then when you're able to evaluate and assess, because some of the times when we tell people to build on their strengths, some of the strengths that people have, Dr. Howell, are detrimental to their forward movement.
Mm.
I talked about a friend I have, and I love her dearly, but she is very meticulous. Like, she is so down to every T that she fails to see the bigger picture. She doesn't see things. As a matter of fact, she's not even able to visualize things because it's always the little minute details that she sees. So she's unable to, and that's her strength, but it's literally a weakness for her, and it's literally hindering her life from being able to see, to strategize, to build, because she can't see the bigger picture. So when we look at strengths and weaknesses, we have to first evaluate what they are. Is this strength something that is helping me? Maybe this strength is something that you need to crush to bring it down, and maybe something that you are so good at, but something that you could be so good at, but it is not yet a strength. Maybe that's what you need to build up. It's one of your weakness, but it could be turned into a strength. So leaders must be able to evaluate their strengths and their weaknesses, and then determine which one do I build so that I will be a better leader. What are these qualities and these skills that I have within me that are hiding, because the very word unleash means that something is tied up and need to be let loose. What are some of these potentials that is lying there dormant that I need now to build on, that could become a strength for me in my leadership space? And that is really what I wanted to add to that. And when I know we're almost out of time, Dr. Howell, and so simply I say, analyze first, and then you determine which one to build and which one first to build first, and which one to allow to stay down. But Dr. Howell, before we leave here, people want some actionable steps or strategies that they can use to unleash the inner person, that inner leader that is there waiting to come out. And I want you to use that as our last question, because we're gone past the 30 minutes mark almost. And so I want you to use that as the last question. What are some of the strategies, the tips, the steps that people can use to really ensure that they unleash that inner leader that is inside there?
Well, the first thing you need to do, like Dr. Janice was saying, you have to analyze what your strengths are. And she brought out a very interesting point, because your strengths can actually turn into a weakness if you obsess on them. So, for example, my wife is very meticulous, like you said, and I see the big picture. And so we balance out each other. So we make a good team. And that's why it's very important that leaders don't find similar-minded people to hang around, because you want to stretch yourself. And the best way to stretch yourself is to surround yourself with people that are not clones of yourself. So if you are big picture oriented, you need a meticulous person. If you are scatterbrained, you need an organizer, or not necessarily scatterbrained, but if you're a dreamer, you need somebody who will hone in on one thing and develop something with it that you can look with. Some people say, hey, you know what? I don't want to just sit around and talk about it. I want to jump right in and get things done. Well, if you jump right in and get things done, you might run out of resources. You might run out of people, which who are also resources, but you also might make it worse because you have not done your homework to see all of the different intricate things that go into play with making that particular thing the way it is. And so you need someone who is a planner to make sure that you have a roadmap, that even if you deviate from that roadmap, you still have a plan that guides you some of the way, and then you need a team of workers. And so you don't just want to jump in and work without knowing who's working left, who's working right, who's working forward, who's working behind. So the best thing that I can say is be intentional about the people that you surround yourself with. Make sure that those people hold you accountable for things that you do. So if you are excessive in your strength, they pull you back down into reality, or they pull you back down into work mode. If you are an overachiever, they give you balance. So everything in life is about balance. You don't want your team to be monolithic. You want your team to be diverse. And then you want to give the team members autonomy over their strengths. So you don't micromanage them. You give them a voice, you give them resources, and you give them training. You as a leader must continually grow. And I go back to John Maxwell quite often, and he talks about the law of the lid. The leader, everyone in that company will only be as good as the limitations of the leader. Or to put it in simple terms, you are only as strong as your weakest link. So if you build yourself as a leader and you build everyone else around you and give them resources to become better, as Brian Tracy says and John Maxwell say, the real test of a leader is how many leaders they produce. So a leader is not a person who is a tyrant. A leader is a person that builds other leaders by giving them what they need to move forward. So as long as you and everyone around you is willing to move forward and they have the resources to move forward and they're bettering themselves and they have abilities to stretch themselves, that is how you provide an environment for everyone to become better leaders, better people, and better at getting the job done.
Excellent points, Dr. Howell. And I'm sure everyone can take away something from that to be able to unleash that inner leader. But I want to just look at it on the other side, because I love how we're balancing each other today. You talk about and we miss Dr. Marcia so much, because I know she would be here with us, but circumstances she can't be here with us, but she's here in spirit, I believe. But the point that I want to make, Dr. Howell, is and let me start from the word unleash, because unleash means to unbridle, to let loose, to release. And that word suggests that there was something, or there is something that is caged or tied up or imprisoned inside of us, that leader. And so I want to say that identifying purpose and assignments are two great ways, because we're talking about steps and strategies to unleash that inner leader. Identifying your purpose, as Dr. Howell said in the very first sentence when he spoke earlier. And your assignments, I add to that, are two ways to unleash your potential. But I want you to hear me well, because we must want to be different in order to change. There is no change that is going to happen before we begin to change ourselves. And the second thing, we must make our future dream our present fact. And I say this is, in other words, you must be before you become. You see, many people say, I want to become a millionaire. But you have to start having that millionaire mentality before you get to the millionaire. Many people said, I want to own a home, but you live in a rent house and you treat the people rent house so badly. How are you going to treat yours? You are in a job, in an employment, and you go to work all kind of late times and you treat the people work so badly. But you expect that you are going to have your own business. How are you going to treat it? So the steps and the strategies that I'm giving you is right here in your mind. You first have to be before you become. Mm-hmm. You first have to do what you want to happen to you. You first have to do that. And the last thing I want to say, and let me just say this: our greatest potential lies within those assignments that sometimes we overlook. I feel like I'm coaching or preaching here, but I'm not. Our greatest potential lies in the assignments and the things that sometimes we overlook. So the doing the thing even before we get there is so important. I believe it is Neville Goddard who said, and I love to read Neville Goddard books. He said, the feeling and the desire is the thing. You must first live in the fulfilled state. You must first live in that desired state that you want even before you get there. You cannot get there unless you start living in that state. You want to move to Georgia, you're going to have to act as if you already live in Georgia. And so sometimes we have to literally take a hold of the law of assumption, which means by the by which the fulfillment of our desires will be realized. We have to already assume, Dr. Howell, that we are there. We have it. We are in the being before we can get there. You know, I tell my daughter, I said, look here, if you want to be a supervisor, you have to start. If you want to become a supervisor, you have to start being a supervisor right where you are, even though you're not a supervisor. You have to act the part, live the part, do the part before you can get there. And those are the strategies we have to use. It's all within you. It starts in the mind as how you think. The Bible and the book says, as a man thinketh, Dr. Howell, so is he. So for every leader, if you want to be the best leader, you have to start doing what a good leader does, as Dr. Howell talked about earlier, before you even get there. You have to start treating your followers the best way, your team members. You have to start doing before you get there, because it's the doing that is going to take you there. And wrap up here for us, Dr. Howell, because I see we're gone all the way over time, and it's getting sweeter at the end. But you wrap up here for us.
Listen. I was listening to one of those YouTube programs from Dr. Eric Thomas, and he was motivating some people, and he was saying that he simply now gets paid for stuff that he was doing for free before. Come on. And that ties into what Dr. Brooks was saying, that you have to start doing before it becomes your reality. But it is a reality in your mind, and once you accept it, then you do it, and then it becomes manifested. And so how I want to wrap this up is this: affirmations are good, believing is good, but doing is what gets you to the next point. And so think like a leader. Well, you want to be a leader, so you start to think like a leader, and then you start to behave and do like a leader, and then you will become a leader. Now, if you want to become a better leader, you start to think like a better leader, and then you start to do like a better leader would do. And then you will, over time, become a better leader. So it all starts with your mindset. By beholding, we become change. Your thoughts become your actions. And so surround yourself with like-minded people in values and principles, not in styles or skills. You want to be diverse in your team when it comes to styles and in abilities, but not in values and principles. Those are where you need to be the same. So you should attract things that are similar to you in values and principles, but different in skills and in abilities. And that is what's going to help you become the best that you can be as a leader.
Thank you so much, Dr. Howell. That is an excellent wrap-up. And I want to leave our audience with today, as Dr. Howell says, believe first and then start doing. And once you believe and you start doing, then you can face the future with confidence. I look at you today and I say to you, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you.
Yes,
so
yes.
Take off the dependence of yourself and place it in the power of God, because he said it is not by might nor by power, but it is by his spirit. And when the enemy of fear, discouragement, disappointment, distraction, and all the disease comes in like a flood, God uses his spirit to lift up a standard of hope, of faith, of love, of overcoming, of resilience, of determination, of perseverance, of all of these good things over and above. You got this and you can do this. Go ahead and unleash that potential, unleash that inner leader that is within you. And remember, live in peace and not in pieces. You can, and I know that you will. Thank you so much again for joining us, wherever you're joining us from. If you were on the live with us, please let us know. And if you are watching the replay at any time, please remember to put hashtag replay so that we can know that you were here with us. We bless you. We bless your purpose and your calling. May you strive above all things and be in good health and prosper. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.